I think it was Force Gaming who said it best that there are two types of early access games. You have early access, and you have polished early access games. And I'm thrilled to be able to share with you guys my experience with Path of Exile 2 over this last weekend. I can absolutely with all confidence say that this is a polished early access experience. And it's the goal of this video to dive in and really try and answer the question, is early access worth jumping into it? I'm going to give you guys my impressions, my thoughts, as well as the investment that I've made into this game so far. Currently, I put $30 onto the PC Steam version. Absolutely satisfied with my time with the game and the cost of getting into early access. So much so that I also went and put $30 to get early access in on the Xbox, being this is a fully cross-play, cross-save, cross-progression game. Which actually just adds a lot of value to me as a player who has the ability to play in multiple different rooms of his home. Now, if you guys like ARPGs, Souls-likes, if you like, me jumping into the culture war from time to time, well, you're in the right spot. If I do earn your subs, sound off in the comments below. I do want to say thank you to the top commenters of this last week, and see them here all wonderfully on screen with Mr. RR YouTube coming in at over 100 comments. So really appreciate you guys for engaging. And if you guys don't subscribe, it's no big deal. I think you can also sound off in the comments as well, and maybe even make the leaderboard here as we check into it from time to time. Let's jump in. There's a lot of thoughts that I want to kind of cover for you guys. Obviously, there are some minor bugs that I've experienced, basically a few disconnects and a few infinite loading screens. That was seemingly related to more cross-platform play than I experienced with it playing with anybody that is on the same platform, or perhaps even on the same server, being that I've been playing in the Central Texas server zones. It's been really fun and easy to experience. It's also been interesting to kind of learn the ebbs and flows. Obviously, with trading, there was a little bit of a visual bug, especially as a controller player specifically, but we were able to work our ways around those things. And that's why I say, like, the issues are so minor that I've experienced so far that it has been a wonderful experience. Now, I wasn't trying to get in on the very second that the game went live, namely because I just don't feel like sitting in queues for long periods of time. So I was able to step into it very smoothly Saturday morning and continue my adventures easily into Sunday afternoon. So if you've had a different experience, I can understand the level of frustration wanting to play, not being able to. But thankfully for me, outside of just getting disconnected, it has been a smooth experience. As we always, within any kind of video game, there's going to be a little bit of drama, obviously, because this is really, you got to be honest with yourself and who you are as a gamer. If you, and I'm not judging you either way, but if you really want that flawless experience, especially because you've actually put money down on the game, well, you're not wrong. But I would always encourage you to avoid early access games, because no matter what, those things are going to collide into each other from time to time. And especially if you play in early access games, you'll see way more of that. So just be honest with who you are. Like, if that is something that you come as even an unspoken expectation, even if it's not an expectation you think you have, you might find yourself a little bit more frustrated, because yes, you have put money into the pot, so to speak, but this is still classified as an early access game, which I do think is the right way to go about games as a service games, flat out. Being that there's an online component, being that there could be all kinds of issues with connections, I just think it actually protects you more than any of the other things we've seen, where games try to just straight up launch and then run within all kinds of issues. And gamers like myself, we're like, I've got plenty of really good games to go play in my backlog. Why do I want to go deal with all the levels of frustration for your game? Obviously, Path of Exile 2 is an established IP, which helps it out. I don't know, I'm struggling with the word. Immensely. That's the word I was looking for. Anyway, personally, I actually am pretty suited for early access games. I don't mind the frustration. I feel like it brings me along with the development team to be able to help test, as well as provide feedback and thoughts, and see what ultimately changes and how it evolves. I've been a part of many games that have been considered early access, or even if you go all the way back to Final Fantasy 14 1.0, where there are definitely all kinds of issues. And I can safely say that my kind of personality is glad that I got to experience it, because I can speak to the vast amount of changes. I can speak to, hey, remember when this was a problem, versus, hey, that's no longer a problem anymore. It does give that level of contrast that I like to see, especially as these games continue to evolve. Now, a little bit ago, I mentioned I'm a controller player. I am going to be putting out a controller guide on this game. I think there are pros and cons to playing Path of Exile 2 on the controller. The first and foremost is this game is built for it. It runs great. The downside is I have not yet been able to figure out how to customize my controller. I like to make a couple of different adjustments. Thankfully, I have an Elite Series 2 Xbox controller, which allows me to use back paddles to basically get over my frustrations. So I have the advantage of having that in my pocket, but ultimately I still think that it is nice to see when you can kind of make adjustments so that everything is working the way that you want. Not that the default is bad, but by no means. It's actually rocking and rolling, and it's quite well done. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a personal preference. And I have to say, if you want to customize your controller and you know how, let me know. I could not find it after spending hours looking through the menus. But if that is something that you need, just note that that is something that is not yet currently available, at least to the best of my knowledge. Now let's talk about what people are going to really kind of kick up online in different circles, the difficulty. Whenever a game, especially a difficult game, comes out, well, you always kind of see that people feel like it is too challenging and it does kind of chase people away. But I am kind of the firm believer, as long as that's the kind of the intention behind the game and the development team is perfectly fine with making that as a difficult experience, well, there's an audience for that. And I think especially as I've stepped into Souls-like and Elden Ring for the first time, like I've discovered there is a huge value to me that I feel has been missing from more modern RPGs. And it's that difficulty actually forces you into the RPG nature of the system, and it makes your decisions have more impact. It makes you really kind of go in and rethink your approach and try out different things to kind of get over those hurdles. And when you take that away, a la like Final Fantasy 16, while that was a fun narrative driven experience, it could have also just been a movie because it didn't really force me to really make any changes. And yes, combat can obviously highlight various different things in the combat in this game. Having that isometric feel still feels like you have a skill that you need to kind of invest in it and continue to work on it. But it does put me into the menu. It does make me look forward to every level up. It does make me rethink the skills that I have, and that makes all the drops more important. So I think it ends up adding way more flavor than it takes away. And yes, there's going to be some people who are turned off by difficult games, and that's a perfectly fine opinion to have. However, I just would invite people to say, well, don't dictate that every game has to be for everybody, because that's just not the case. When you try to make a game for everybody, you end up making a game for nobody, and that is seen time and time again, especially across the last few years within gaming itself. You can clearly see the standouts, and you can clearly see those that try to appeal to more people, kind of actually having an equal and opposite, effect in their regards. Now, I want to talk briefly about story. This will not have any spoilers, just mind you, because I got asked numerous times while streaming, hey, does this game have a story to it? And I could say, yes, it does have a story. Yes, I think the voice acting and the way that the pacing is happening is actually quite decent. Do I know what's really happening? Not a clue. And I think that's going to require multiple different playthroughs, maybe even a couple of YouTube videos to truly get the narrative that is being told. Obviously, I'm starting to learn various different characters, and obviously, I think that's great. If you're looking for that RPG narrative driven experience, you're going to find a story here. But if you're asking me like what my impressions of the story are, it's like, I think it seems like it's a high quality story, but I don't yet feel like I truly know the world and what I've kind of truly stepped into. I think that's just going to be a function of time. Moving on to graphics and audio design, guys, like I mentioned it briefly in terms of just the voice acting, but the audio, the graphics, all of this really sets a mood, kind of in an environment, kind of just this it's kind of weird. It's like, it feels like it's just putting this incredibly beautiful experience. Immersion is probably the word that actually best describes it. That feels very immersive. I think the world makes sense. I think everything kind of around it fits into the theme. The sound design and the effects and all that just feel right on, spot on. And so I have no critique, no issues with that. And the final kind of piece before we get into our message of hope for this video is that how does this stack up then with No Rest for the Wicked? As Scott writes, No Rest for the Wicked, who PoE just launched. And I saw the No Rest for the Wicked devs also tweeting out about this. I think this is one of those options where success begets success, that these games all can easily exist and they can actually benefit from each other. So it's not so much about actually competing as about putting out the best ideas, seeing what people and players resonate with, and learning and evolving from each other. I can say it's very interesting to kind of see the loading screens in Path of Exile 2, where in No Rest for the Wicked, they don't exist. And that might not seem like a big thing, but it actually feels way more cohesive in that regards. And so I actually am happy for both Path of Exile and No Rest for the Wicked. They are two different games, and the combat, you can feel that. Obviously, No Rest for the Wicked also in early access, but we're still waiting for the multiplayer update. We're still waiting for it to come to consoles. And so Path of Exile 2 has a clear edge over No Rest for the Wicked at this moment. I do think both of these games are going to, especially if you like the ARPGs, be a part of your library, and it could easily see that you can jump between them as different updates and things like that roll out, especially with that Souls-like difficulty that they've kind of built in. But also kind of like to round out that difficulty discussion just a little bit, in RPGs, difficulty is really, I think, more of a function of time. How much are you willing to grind on something to continue to increase your power level? Because you can kind of somewhat scale the difficulty, especially based off the class that you're playing and the amount of experience that you're willing to go out and grind for, to help offset some maybe of that challenge that happens from time to time. Now, as we wrap up this video, I thank you guys for the opportunity to talk to you today about Path of Exile 2. I want to end with my message of hope. This is something that we do here at the channel for those of you guys who are new. And today we're focusing in on self-care, especially as we go into the holiday seasons. I think your mental health is incredibly important. And I think there are various different factors that actually connect your mental health to all of your life. And namely, that's your physical health. But there's these aspects in our daily life that you might not be aware of. And I just want to kind of call them into the forefront of your mind and challenge you to kind of take on some of these very, I think, easy steps that you can try and make and see how, if it has an improvement on your life, especially again with the sun not being up as much here in the northern hemisphere. I know I have vitamin D deficiency, and that also can have various knock-on effects. So taking vitamin D can be a huge help, and it might actually improve your overall mood, especially if you have seasonal affective disorder like I do. Now, on that note, eating right, sleeping well is obviously huge, but also I want to focus you on doing some of the small things that can really help set you up for a huge amount of success. And that is making your bed, brushing your teeth, and taking a shower. You don't realize just how many times when you walk by your bed or an area of your house that's just a little bit cluttered, that it can actually just impact you negatively, not in a way that it's it draws it right into your focus, but there is this kind of passiveness that happens that kind of just makes you and bogs you down. In fact, that's one of the things that when you think about it, especially if you have a very cluttered life, reducing that clutter, getting it out and putting it in a box, and then essentially, if you don't ever have to go to that box for 6 months, then just donate it, because essentially that ends up being something that you could have too much stuff, and it actually has a negative impact on your mental health as well. So just note that clutter, making your bed, some of these things that when you walk through the room, you'll actually find more a sense of peace and less a sense of oh man, I need to, because subconsciously you're wasting all this processing power that your brain has on oh yeah, I need to get to that at some point, but you keep pushing it off. Now, I'm just as guilty as everybody else. This is just something that is a constant thing that we have to work towards, practice on, and it will come. But it is not necessarily something you perfect. It's always going to be something that you're got to be all right, it's time to kind of set that aside. But brushing your teeth, taking a shower, making your bed, those are some very simple things that you can start to do today that I think will have, kind of in a way, momentum that will apply to some of maybe the bigger things that we all have to get done. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for the time that you give me today, and I hope that you have a wonderful time with Path of Exile 2, whether you decide to pick it up or if you're going to wait for the full release sometime in 2025. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Hopefully I'll see you next time, but until then, Take care.